Welcome to LSAT Unplugged, Ali.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining. So I'm really excited to speak with you. You formerly worked in admissions at the University of Arizona. First off, tell us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Correct. Yeah. So I did not originally intend to work in admissions when I got out of law school. I graduated from law school and I worked in a large regional law firm for some time. And I was actually really drawn to kind of the human resources portions of that job. And when my personal life took me to Arizona, I decided to pursue that and get into legal administration, so law school administration. So I absolutely loved it. I was there for 4 years, started as the assistant director of admissions, and then worked my way up to, I think, director of admissions, and then director of admissions and financial aid, and then eventually assistant dean of. So during the course of all of those positions together, I did a little bit of everything. Reviewed thousands of applications, made scholarship decisions, read a lot of personal statements, met a lot of excited, really fabulous candidates for law school. So it was completely rewarding job.
Wow, that sounds incredible. So you really worked your way up the ladder there and got into this position where you're just encountering all these incredible law school applicants, evaluating their applications. Can you share with us a bit about what that process is actually like in terms of the flow? The applicant hits submit, what happens next?
Sure. So it all comes over to wherever they apply, and in my case, the law school that I worked at, Arizona, electronically. So every day we got a queue of files that came in. From there, we somewhat randomly divided them, tried not to read, all the files with high LSATs at one time. We really tried to make it an even process. We read a lot of files, especially in the fall, the beginning of the fall season. We would read in the office. We would take them home with us. We would read during dinner. We would read at coffee shops every in the weekend, just to get through them. So usually during my time there, it was myself and another admissions officer, the director or dean at the time, depending on where I was in my career there, that would read the files initially. And like I said, a group of probably about, I would say maybe 15, 20 per day. We'd always have a second set of eyes on them, just to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. And then they would go through the admissions committee once we did our initial review from the admissions office.
Sure. Wow. Thanks for that breakdown. So you're getting 15 to 20 a day that you're evaluating. And of course, you're only going to work so many hours in a day. So each part of the application only has so much time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
given limited time, what does an applicant need to do to make their personal statement stand out, given that you're only given maybe how much time to read it? What, like a half hour for the whole file, less even?
Yeah, I would definitely say probably about a half hour less per file, definitely. You've asked a great question. The numbers, as you know, and as probably everybody knows by now, are certainly important. But the personal statement is really where you can set yourself apart in your application. So it's my favorite part of the application. I hope that every client I work with, I hope it's their favorite part of the application after they're done with it. It's hard. It's the hardest part of it. So an applicant needs to dig deep to get a personal statement that stands out. It needs to describe their personal characteristics, and how those personal characteristics led them to where they are, and how perhaps it leads them into the future in law as it relates to the law. And some of the most effective personal statements, I think, I almost think it's necessary. It really has to be personal examples, stories that, as we talked about, I'm reading, admissions officers are reading, admission committees are reading a lot of applications. So they really do need to be interesting. And that's not to say that you need to have rescued puppies out of a pet store to be interesting, or have some kind of hardship that you've overcome to be interesting, but it does need to be written in an interesting way. And I do feel like personal stories are the way to go to do that.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think it's good to know people do often worry that they haven't done anything super impressive or super exciting and just they live an ordinary life. But you can still make that interesting if you get personal and dig into your story, whatever your unique characteristics and attributes and strengths are.
Absolutely. And I think that in order to do that, you really need to take a lot of time and do a lot of pre-work to get there. So a lot of times in my current position with Stratus, we see folks who come to us with a draft of a personal statement. It's already written. And in some cases, it's a little evident that they haven't put in that pre-work to get the best product that they absolutely can. And that takes a lot of time. It's hard work. Brainstorming, outlining, redoing your outline, drafting, redrafting. So it's definitely not a easy process to get the best product out. And it definitely has to be personal, not too personal, but it needs to have a level of introspection that comes with that pre-work the applicants are doing.
So let's say that someone doesn't have any relevant legal work experience. Like there are paralegals or maybe people who've interned at a DA's office, and that might be a natural starting point for a topic. But let's say someone doesn't have an internship, doesn't have work experience that applies. What are some topics you've seen that could work well and some topics that applicants should avoid?
A lot of candidates don't have direct legal experience, and that's okay. It's one of the beauty, I think, of law school is that you can come from any background and still be an excellent attorney and an excellent law student. So having direct legal, paralegal, law intern experience is nice. It can show in some candidates a demonstrated interest in the law. However, it's definitely not necessary. So there are a number of ways you can go with topics for personal statements, and it's all so individual. So there's no right or wrong kind of theme. Again, I think it goes back to what are your personal characteristics? How did it lead you on your specific path as to where you are, what you've done, using stories to demonstrate that? And that kind of leads to why are you applying to law school? It kind of comes to that. Why are you here right now doing this and sending me this personal statement? And perhaps, what do you want to do with it? Although from an admissions perspective, we certainly understand that can change through time. So I would say a not so great personal statement might be one that focuses quite a bit on what they want to do in the future. When I went to law school, I thought I was going to be a family law attorney. And then I ended up practicing corporate real estate law in a law firm, and here I am now. So we definitely know that changes. So that's not very persuasive. On the other hand, I can think of a recent client who started with this great story. It was something she was interested in. She came from a country that had treatment of women was not so great. So it was a personal passion of hers. And when she first when we were talking about it and she came up with the idea, it kind of started as an academic essay, something that you might submit in a class. This is the situation. Here are the statistics on why this is so terrible, and I want to help. As we develop, and that's not a strong personal statement right there. That might be a strong academic essay for one of your undergraduate classes. But to turn that into something that we could actually use a really strong personal statement, we had to really dig deep. And she had to dig deep. And it turns out, she was interested in this. And then it turned out that she had actually taken action to kind of help with the situation. And she had been involved in organizations, and she had started this business to help women in this situation. Not even a business, organization to help women in these situations. So that was this, that started from something, just her interest. She wanted to help people, and it turned into something great as we got just more into the details, and that made it a very interesting story. Sorry, I just spoke a lot.
No, that's fantastic.
I answered way more than you asked.
That's fantastic. I think that really shows that it does need to be personal in the end, and there's a way that you can bring it there. Yeah. But the dry nature of just what I want to do in the future, which may change, is totally speculative versus what you've already done in the past. Yeah. That shows why you're a good candidate for law school, that you're likely to be successful in your future career, whatever it may be.
And I think that, if some people more than others, if you are, a bit of, you have some professional experience that has demonstrated your interest in, say, immigration law or something like that, that's great. And, you may have a much more firm idea of what you're going to do for the future. So I don't want to discourage people to talk about, how they plan to use their law degree. But, be careful with that.
Do you think a personal statement needs to say why you want to go to law school?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but your application in its entirety needs to lead an admissions committee to understand that. Right. So your personal statement is kind of probably the most natural place where that would, you can say that in an indirect or direct way. But everything together needs to build to the answer to that question.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. But I could see potentially if the personal statement topic was just something else altogether, maybe the diversity statement or some other sort of optional essay could tie into that in some way.
Definitely. I completely agree. It has to just all make sense and tell a story.
Right.
Tell your story. Yeah.
Yeah. I could imagine someone thinking that someone who has maybe had some legal or disciplinary action on the character and fitness side of things, trying to use that as a way to say, I've been on the wrong side of the law, now I want to be on the right side of the law. I'm guessing that's probably not such a great idea.
That is a terrible idea. That's a really terrible idea. Well, you have experience with the legal system, so I guess that,
right.
You can, depending on how you creatively weave that into your application, it might work for you. But there might be better ways. Character and fitness is definitely an interesting topic. Oh man, working in the admissions office for years, you start to think that everybody has a minor in possession.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, as an applicant, you don't be too afraid to, don't be nervous about sharing some of those things. Some of them are really not big deal to get. They don't really care that you had, a noise violation in your dorm room or, even a minor in possession. They're looking at patterns. They're looking at judgment. They're looking at taking responsibility. They definitely want you to be, you have to certainly err on the side of disclosure. Read the questions carefully, the kind of the obvious things. Not try to hide anything. One of the things that Stratus does, and I do, is through U.S. News and World Report, we have there's a blog on there that it's a law admissions lowdown, and so sometimes I respond to the questions that come up on there, and I'm actually surprised at how the number of questions I get that are trying to work or game the system in some way with regard to the character and fitness questions. The question says this. Do I have to disclose this? And these are the circumstances. And, it's like, yes, please disclose that. That's fine. You're going to be okay. So that's my 2 cents on character and fitness.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and you don't want it to come back and hurt you later when you're going before the bar.
Ah,
All this
absolutely.
stuff could come out later, and then you went to law
Absolutely.
school for nothing.
There are so many reasons to just disclose. Yeah.
But I guess the overall takeaway is character and fitness, disclose and be matter of fact and brief.
Yes. Matter of fact, brief, just say the facts, take responsibility. Yeah, all of those things.
When you were at Arizona, just to shift gears a little bit, I'm
Yeah.
curious about the issue of the LSAT and taking it multiple times.
Yeah.
Because retaking is more common
Yeah.
than ever before. They've increased the number of times it's being offered.
Yes.
I'm wondering, in your conversations with current admission officers and based on your experience, what's your intuition about someone who's taken it 3, 4, 5 times or more?
Yeah. So it's as you know, as most people know by now, the highest score is reported to U.S. News and World Report. It's reported, so that's important to know. What I think is equally important to know for applicants is that law schools look carefully at your other tests results, and you know they don't ignore the low test score and say, oh, well, they got a 170, so we're just going to report that, and that's good. We're good to go here. Because ultimately, I think what law schools are looking for are good students, consistent, good students. So I don't want to, I don't want to suggest that the highest score goes and nobody ever bats an eye at the other scores. When I used to review files, I definitely used to, I don't know if you remember, in Sesame Street, there was one of these kids is doing his own thing, or one of these things is,
not
doing
like the
something
others,
different.
right?
Yeah, not like the others. So, yeah, exactly. You got it. So, when I was reviewing files, I kind of used to play that game, and I'd say, okay, so, all right, we got a 3.0 GPA, and we got a 150, and we got a 152, and we got a 170, and we got mediocre letters of recommendation. What kind of student is this? And vice versa. We have a 3.8 GPA, we got a 170, and we got a 155. Which one am I? Which of these things is the outlier, basically? So you're really looking at the whole picture, and all of those points are important, including all scores. So I'm not even answering your question yet. I'm really talking a lot here.
No, this is all useful to think about, though. It makes me think a lot more about the idea of these splitters, high LSAT, low GPA.
Yeah.
Could that be enough? If your GPA was terrible and your LSAT was amazing, that's great that you can pull it all together for one day, but you've got 3 years of law school ahead of you.
Right. And these are all things that admission committees are trying to analyze and assess, because ultimately it is important I'm not going to lie, it's important to consider kind of that business perspective of what's going to be reported, what does that mean to the rankings, but ultimately, at least at Arizona and other schools that I know, and I hope all schools, they're looking for more than that. They're looking for what kind of students are going to fit in, what kind of students are going to be excellent in the classroom. They're looking at that academic piece of it. So to go back to your question, I think it's kind of dangerous for students to hopefully. I hope they don't just think they can take it because it's offered, because the admissions committees are going to be looking certainly at all the scores, and they're going to be, at least if I were sitting on the admissions committee, I'd be considering judgment too, and I'd be like, what's going on here? So I would certainly need an explanation, I think, in the form of perhaps an addendum to figure out what happened. Why are they taking so many tests? Which one should I be looking at, and what are the circumstances? When I was at Arizona, more for grade point average, GPA considerations, but we would actually call candidates when they didn't provide an explanation for some things, we'd call or email them and probably freak them right out, by saying, hey, I noticed this in your application. You didn't address it. What happened? Or what's going on? So probably a lot of schools would not do that. They might, but what you don't want to happen is them to make a bad assumption or an assumption that you don't want them to make.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Is there a certain, just to put a hard number on this, is there a certain number of takes or a certain number of cancellations that you would say that person should probably write the addendum or not?
To answer your question directly, no. I don't think there is a certain number. I think it's all individual. I think, a lot of these questions, everything's individual. One test, 2 tests, 3 tests, any more than 3 tests, I would definitely provide some kind, I think, and again, it has to be individual. I'd provide some kind of explanation. Cancellations, 1 cancellation, maybe 2, so there's really no black or white answer to that question. I think once you get into the 3 test category, 4 tests, though, I'd be real curious, kind of, what do you just like taking the test? Like, I don't who likes taking that test? So I'd be real curious about that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think maybe more than 3 takes or more than 3 cancellations or 3 or more starts to become a question mark.
Absolutely. And you just don't want the admissions committee wondering. They're going to draw their own conclusions, and you want to be careful about that.
Right. Yeah, the big question mark. I guess if you have 4 cancellations, that is a question mark.
What the heck?
And there's
what's
ambiguity
that?
too.
Yeah, and the admissions committee is always asking, how is this going to translate into the classroom? You prepared, and then you backed out. What does that mean when you're in a property class? Are you gonna, how does that go? I find that also. I used to find that in more again in GPA addenda. Sometimes the explanations or got a little, it's hard to write a good GPA addendum, because how do you do that without someone reading that and reading into what that means for law school? So, and I've heard other people say this before too, that I didn't do well in this class because I hated the material. Well, guess what? You're probably not going to like, all of the classes in law school. Or, LSAT, I didn't prepare as well as I should have. Oh, what's that mean? Are you going to prepare for your, tests in law school? So, you have to just be real careful about how you phrase and tone and all of those things.
Right. Very useful to think about how the admission officers will read into it for the future.
Absolutely.
I do want to shift gears before we wrap up and talk a little bit about the GRE, because it is being accepted by more and more schools. And if I remember correctly, Arizona was one of the first to start taking the GRE. Is that right?
Yes, I was not there. It was actually after my time, but I did hear that they were one of the first ones. They have a lot. Arizona actually, I think it initiated a lot of creative programs. And so it does not surprise me that they were one of the first ones.
Yeah.
They were all about access to legal studies. And of course, on the business side, you have to consider, I think at the time that it started, perhaps applications were down kind of across the board. So we're also looking to kind of build, how do we find people?
Yeah. Simple as that. Yeah. Now, are there particular applicants for whom you think the GRE might be an especially good fit as compared to the average applicant?
The GRE I think it's tricky. I would almost never recommend taking it instead of the LSAT. Almost. I think there are probably some circumstances that would be a better fit. But from the applicant perspective, purely from an options basis, you want to have all the options in the world that you can create for yourself. And by taking just the GRE, you're certainly limiting those options, because there are only, 30 or so schools, in the 30s. So from that perspective, I would certainly advise clients to take the LSAT. There are exceptions, and I have not run into any of those exceptions. But perhaps for a non-traditional candidate who has otherwise demonstrated that they will do very well in law school somehow, some
Right.
kind of strong other academic indicator.
Maybe some super strong academics or super
Yeah.
strong work experience.
Yeah, something along those lines. But I think LSAT, it's the test that everybody is familiar with at this point. Admission, you can compare apples to apples from an admissions committee perspective. Everything else is really very variable, including GPA, different schools, different courses, different everything. But the LSAT is really apples to apples, and so it's a little bit easier. So I would definitely advise for the LSAT. But once again, it is individual, and certainly be a case where the GRE would be a good option. And
Sure.
I don't think we know at this point either how exactly that translates into bar passage, or I'm not sure that we have the data yet for the GRE.
Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity there. The studies are a little bit questionable, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah.
The LSAT, you're tried and true, demonstrated over the years.
Yeah.
And the connection there.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, Ali, this has been enormously useful and educational, and I'm sure that everyone will find it valuable. Do you want to share a little bit about the work you do with clients at Stratus and the best way for folks to work with you?
Sure. So Stratus is a terrific consulting company. I think we're unique in a few ways. We do offer free consultations, free half-hour consultations. So if anyone has any questions, they can certainly reach out to us in that way, and we can talk about your application a little bit further or any questions you have. We also, I think we're, again, unique in that we have a very personalized approach with our clients. In addition to me as your counselor getting to know you very, very well, we have senior consultants who kind of step in the place of an admissions committee and someone who does not know you as well and will review your personal statement as if they're an admissions committee. So I think that's a little bit different than some companies. I really appreciate that. It's a terrific place. So, yep, they can email at info@stratusadmissions.com or go to our webpage, stratusadmissionscounseling.com, and sign up for a free half-hour consultation.
Perfect. Well, I would definitely recommend folks take advantage of the free consultation, take advantage of the counseling. And thank you again, Ali, for joining. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was a pleasure.